Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the Real Ballz podcast. It's Wednesday, September 26th. I am Ryan Squires, and we are going to be talking about all kinds of cool stuff today. Going to be going over some bowling news, really breaking down a product review, products of the past, products that are currently available, as well as kind of how the game's evolved. But first, I want to start off by welcoming all of you in, thanking you for watching this. But I also want to go over some bowling news and some things that are going on right now. Start off with some Team USA stuff. The women are competing in PABCOM right now for Team USA, and they are literally competing on a squad right now. Shannon Puhowski, Liz Culkin are out there competing for doubles right now behind Jordan Richardson and Shannon O'Keefe, who took the lead earlier today. The ladies' singles took place already with Angie Ramirez finishing third for Team Colombia, and Brazil's Stephanie Martins winning gold in singles, as well as Shannon Puhowski came up with a bronze for Team USA in the singles edition. The Team USA announced that who was going to be traveling for the men's championships, and they'll be going to Hong Kong. It'll take place November 24th through December 5th. The Team USA members who were chosen, it was Andrew Anderson, Chris Barnes, Jacob Buttriff, Tommy Jones, and EJ Tackett, as well as Kyle Troop. So a lot of young talent on that team, a lot of people going to compete, but you still got some of those older guys like Tommy Jones, Chris Barnes, some of that experience that'll help make a difference. But the PBA announced that they had their format ready to go for the upcoming season, and so that'll be pretty cool. They're going to be vying for that $100,000 prize, but the top 24 will be determined by points earned across 13 tournaments designed or classified as Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. Tier 1 will be your majors, Tier 2 will be your regular traditional events, and Tier 3 is going to be your smaller limited field events. But those points, with Tier 1 earning you 50% more than Tier 2, Tier 2 earning 3 times as many as Tier 3 events, those point winners will be able to be eligible for that $100,000 prize, which will be really good because of the fact that it gives something, a goal for everyone to aim towards. Not just winning a title, but something for everyone to go and aim to make the playoffs, similar to another sport, or whether it's basketball, football, golf. Even in NASCAR, the drivers are vying to make the finals. So that'll be really exciting to see that those individuals are able to compete and, fight for an end-of-the-year goal, which will be really good to see the PBA continue to grow. It creates more of that excitement going for that big prize. Now in Thailand, during the WBT event in Thailand right now, Anthony Simonson, Francois Lavoie, Jesper Svensson, Sean Rash, they all are in the top 8 of the Thailand Open. Danielle McEwen is in 5th right now. Nuhai Finn is in 3rd, and Sinley Jane is in 1st currently. But those individuals make up the top 8, and you've still got some guys outside that are, in 11th, Kyle Troop, Michael Tang's in 12th, Darren Tang's in 16th, Tommy Jones in 17th, Bill O'Neill in 20th. So there's still a lot of bowling to go in Thailand, but seeing those numbers, getting those advancements, it's good to see that the WBT is providing events for everybody to bowl in while the season is not competing. But I think we can all agree that bowling on the PBA has become more of a world event. It's become a world bowling tour in the sense, not just in name, but in the actual travel as well. And I think that's good for bowling as a whole. That's good for the people that are competing, and it gives them more events to bowl in, and it can be very costly for international players to come over. And I think that's the one thing I will give the PBA credit, a lot of credit for actually, is the fact that when they say that you're the best in the world in the PBA, you really are, because in a sense, the tour is open to countries all over. So it's not like American football where it's primarily American and there's no other competition. When you think about the world as a whole, you think about all the players who are competing on a world stage to become the best in the world, not just the best in the United States, not just the best in Europe, but the best in the world. And no one has signified that more than Belmo has. And I saw a tweet from Belmo yesterday in which he said in 3 years of travel, just totaling up Emirates Airlines and Qantas Airlines, he said that he had traveled 1.2 million kilometers in distance, or 1,550 hours. Well, 1,550 hours of travel is 64 and a half full days of travel. But 1.2 kilometers, or 1.2 million kilometers, is equivalent to about 745,000 miles if you were to take it from kilometers to miles. But if you really break that down, in 3 years, you could travel to the moon 3 times, or 1.5 round trips to the moon and back, and be the same equivalent as what he's traveled for competing in the PBA. So if you think about that, that is averaging a trip to the moon every year in just mileage. That's insanity. That is absolutely insane. If you break down the amount of time that's spent, roughly 21 days a year overall, night to day, is spent just flying on airplanes. That's a significant chunk of travel. And I think as the World Bowling Tour continues to grow and continues to evolve, as well as the PBA, you might start seeing more of those events in Australia, in Europe, in Thailand, places like that, where bowling is still very popular. It's still very popular there, and there's still a lot of travel where that would be closer than coming to the US for a lot of these players. But for now, I think it's great that the PBA is able to put out events that still make people qualified for WBT titles, PBA titles, and it's a good conglomeration partnered with USBC to basically get everybody on the same page as far as being able to compete. Because for a while there, it was very difficult to make a living while bowling. It was very difficult to try to make any money while bowling when you were spending, the prize funds were down. I mean, I remember events that were paying $8 grand to win. That's not a very good return when you think about that. But, you know, some of these events are really good. They provide opportunities for people in their country, as well as people that are wanting to compete year-round and not just have a bowling season. Because you got to remember, these players aren't just traveling for competition. They're traveling to go to clinics. They're traveling for distributor events, manufacturer events. They do coaching, a lot of them travel for industry-wide events. So there's a lot of different events that these people are traveling for, and so those miles really add up. And I think when you think about travel, it's often glorified of how awesome it is. But the fact is travel can get pretty old pretty fast, especially if you're going from one place to another constantly while trying to compete. It can be very taxing, I'm sure. But a few of the things I wanted to go over today, with this being a product day, I want to go over some accessories and things that were from years past that maybe some pro shop operators will recognize, that other bowlers who have bowled for a lot of years will recognize, and kind of break down how bowling has evolved, whether it's between balls, bags, shoes, accessories, everything. And some of the early products that you think of when you think of bowling are not necessarily as popular anymore, but they're still around. They didn't go anywhere. They're just not near as popular. One of the first ones that comes to mind for me is the buffet ball. If anyone remembers the buffet ball or the seesaw, those were primary ball carrying pieces of equipment back in, you know, the 70s, 80s, 90s. They were huge. I mean, people who had lockers at bowling centers, they would put their bowling balls in there. They'd use them to clean. You'd see them squirting cleaner in there, and they'd use those to clean them. You would see people would put their bowling balls in bags, and then they would actually put it in the buffet ball first, and then they'd put it in the bag. So there was all kinds of different products that were around long ago. One of which comes to mind is the old polish. Now, you don't see a lot of this anymore, and this one's a little old. It was updated to this. You might see this, but you know, the polish is something that used to have a very significant impact on bowlers. If you were a bowler, you knew how to use polish, you knew what it did. It created length, allowing you to get the ball down lane. Now, why that was important was because the manufacturer may only have 6 balls out at the time, or less, and you would need to be able to take a ball and get it to get far enough down lane, particularly on old wooden lanes. When wooden lanes were still in between wooden lanes and synthetic lanes, as centers were adapting, you would start to see people would go to a house that had older wooden lanes, and they would need to use some sort of polish to get the ball down lane because it would be too aggressive. So polish is something that has kind of faded into the background because of the simple fact that most people now either have a ball that goes long enough, or the other side of it is they buy a ball. If they're bowling at a center that is typically pretty dry, then they buy a bowling ball that fits that center, or they drill it to fit that center, and don't necessarily use quite as much polish as they used to. Kind of a product that's faded into the background. Another one that was really popular, especially in the pro shop business, but now has really faded by, the wrist guard. The Robbie's Plus wrist guard, or even your forearm guards here, like these old Storm ones. So these products were basically designed, as you can tell, the wrist guard had the metal in it. I'm sure a lot of you remember this, but if you remember when you got a wrist guard, it used to have this huge bump here, and it felt really awkward to hold the ball because you'd put it on your hand and it'd have this bump sticking up against the ball, made it really hard to hold on to the ball at times. And so you'd see people who needed more support, they'd wear forearm supports or things of that nature. But these right here, I mean, even with leather casing, you'd start to see these would wear out. You would start to see that your game, you never really saw too many real high average bowlers wearing wrist guards like this. Now, there are a lot of bowlers who, especially back in the day, would wear the wrist guards like the style that you see today that Storm has, that they're almost like mechanical arms. They keep your wrist straight. They keep it from breaking. It basically gives you the ability to lift on the ball without necessarily having to actually lift on the ball. But, you know, that's something that you saw a lot more popularity with back in, you know, the 90s, late 80s, where they were you know, you used to see them on tour. You'd see guys out there who would have them on tour. You'd see a lot of, they're very popular with women still, to get that wrist, to be able to keep that wrist under the ball. But you've got the Robbies, you had positioners. Another product that I think most pro shop operators have probably seen go by the wayside is the quad roller and the 6-ball roller. So obviously I don't have enough room to pull out a quad roller right now, but your quad rollers and your 6-ball rollers, the early 6-ball rollers and even the quad rollers had hard shells on them. They had hard molded plastic shells, and they sat basically what looked like they were on racks. And you could pull it along, and it was kind of revolutionary at the time, but as people started getting quad rollers, they got more and more expensive, but they also were very bulky. You'd have to take them apart. You'd have to lift the bottom base up, and then you'd have to, you know, it usually had the handle on it, so it was a little awkward. You had to lift the top up. I remember back when I was in high school having to, my mom would have to take me to practice when I was out of school because I wasn't driving yet, and having to load that into the vehicle in the morning was the biggest nightmare you could think of, because you're supposed to take it apart, and all you want to do is just pick this whole thing up and just throw it in the back of the car because it's a pain in the ass. So those bowling ball bags have kind of gone by the wayside as time's gone on. I'm sure a lot of you remember, and I wish I had an example, but I don't, of Pro Grip Cream. It's actually still available, but it's not something that is as widely used as it used to be. Pro Grip Cream allowed bowlers to get that feel on their fingers, shot after shot. You didn't need a lot of it. It just helped you get a better grip on the ball. But one of the biggest innovations I think a lot of people have seen over the years is with finger inserts. So a lot of us are used to using finger inserts or seeing finger inserts. Pro shop operators love to sell finger inserts because they have great margin. But when it comes to finger inserts, back in the day, I'm sure if you've ever watched Parker Bone or anyone like that compete, you've seen Contour. And Contour would be the equivalent today of something that's similar to 10th frame, Pro Sport, but they are lift grips similar to like this, and they didn't come with two sides like the ovals or the lifts. It was only, you know, the one side, but you would see a lot of people, they'd have a little little thing on their pants that would say like contour grips or something of that nature. But the only thing that was bad about these is they didn't allow you to have an oval side. It was lift grips, and it was to help people lift. And then as people didn't need to lift on the ball as much anymore because the balls were capable of creating the reaction themselves, the lift grips have kind of gone by the wayside, especially when it comes to the pitch and the feel that goes with it. The pitch and feel is totally different with a lift grip than it is with an oval grip. But you've got the contour grips, and I'm sure we all remember tape before it was tape, basically, and that is new skin, because everybody who's a pro shop operator or who bowls a lot has used new skin before. And I'm sure if you've used it, you remember it burned like hell putting it on. You typically are supposed to put a little patch there, and a lot of that's been replaced with tape. Now people will tape up their fingers and whatnot, but it was the ability to continue on, especially when you think back in the day of the contour grips and of bad pitches and what we didn't know back then, stretching bowlers out. The fit and feel was night and day different. So you would see pro shops operators who would drill bowling balls, what would be considered today to be wildly inaccurate. But back then, it was normal, and so that wear on the thumb and on the fingers causing blisters and whatnot was not something that you could just ignore. You wanted to keep bowling, you had to get used to new skin, and you had to make do with what you could. And some of the early tapes that we've seen in finger tapes and whatnot are similar to this. You'll see it's just a plain roll. Now this is some of the early tape when it came to being able to get a product that wasn't so fat or so big that it made you have to drill the holes bigger. See, that was the biggest thing, is that people would want to wear a Band-Aid back then or whatever they could to stop their blister from hurting. But the problem is that you had to make the holes bigger. So before you did that, you could put the patch on, you could put the new skin on, and it would really help you to be able to continue on. Now, some of our modern day products, which I don't have a lot of here, but some of our modern day products that we've seen adapt from the products of the past, but also continue to see a lot of growth in, are shoe, sole, and heel replacements. This is something that when Dexter released it years ago was a big deal, and now, you know, as time's gone on, every company's got this, but basically the ability to not have to just go buy another pair of shoes, the ability to be able to take your shoes and manipulate the bottoms of your shoes, whether it's with a different sole, a different heel, replacing soles and heels if they're worn out, whatever it was, the ability to do that without having to go buy another pair of shoes unless you wanted to, was a big innovation. That was a big deal. You've seen a lot of people who have started using shoe sliders. They use the shoe sliders because it's a cheap option to make sure that as synthetic approaches become more and more prevalent, they don't have to worry about the humidity in the air causing them to stick. So and I've seen some rough goes of these where people would use things like socks and whatnot. But shoe sliders have definitely, as synthetic approaches are becoming more and more common day, in the summertime months, in the fall when they're starting their leagues, it becomes harder and harder because of the humidity to slide. Thus, shoe sliders increase in popularity. You've started to see bowling ball polish replaced with ball cleaner. Back in the day, it was so difficult to get people to clean their bowling balls. It just was. You couldn't convince somebody that a bowling ball could lose reaction. For the longest time, it was like banging your head against a wall to get someone to realize that, hey, your bowling ball can not only wear out, but it can lose its reaction and basically not hit the pins as well if it's not taken care of properly. And it took forever to get people to understand that was a fact and it was true. And so now, and they weren't replacing balls at a rate that they are now back then. So you would see people who wouldn't clean their bowling ball. So some of the modern day products you started seeing were, cleaners. You see a lot more cleaners now that have replaced the polishes and whatnot. And so people are cleaning their bowling balls a lot more. Like I said, they're not using as much polish, but at least they are maintaining their products typically more, or taking it to the pro shop to have that done. You've seen a large increase in kinesiology tape, all kinds of kinesiology tapes, whether it's body tape, whether it's finger tapes. We've gone over them all a million times. But one of the biggest innovations I think that made a big difference for a lot of people were the 3-ball inline bags. And if you're a pro shop, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You probably remember some of the early Storm ones that came out with the big Storm writing on it. But you saw these 3-ball inline bags, and they were so cool because if you had come off of an era with quad rollers or even the original 3-ball bags, what you saw was when you wanted to travel, you couldn't take your bowling balls with you because they weighed too much. They were over the airline weights. And so what that brought on these 3-ball inline bags that allowed you to take the shoe bags off and basically have enough weight. If you did 15, 15, 15, the bag didn't weigh enough to put it over the 50-pound weight limit. So that was a pretty big innovation, considering it launched what would eventually be the backpack generation of bowlers, which is everybody hauling these 3-ball rollers around with backpacks on. And that was something that was not that prevalent back in the 90s, 2000s. You would see a lot of people who would have those big bags. The bigger the bag, the better, right? And then all of a sudden, these 3-ball inline bags allowed people to travel, but what it didn't allow is it didn't allow you any room for shoes and whatnot. So because those accessory bags came off, so it really ushered in the next generation of backpacks being used by all the bowlers who were competing. But some of those are early products, some of them are modern day products. Some of the other ones that are available, and some of them that really catch my eye, are from both eras. And this is how you know if you have a really good product. If you have a really good product out on the market, it will survive in almost any era. And what I mean by that is whether it's slide powders, okay? You look at your Easy Slide, Sure Slide, Ultra Slide. Those have survived era to era. Now, you'll have people who get upset that they're used on shoes or whatever it is, but they have survived from era to era. You've got rosin bags from Forest, Ebonite, Storm, allowing you to grip the ball better. You started seeing a lot of those rosin bags that have evolved into more of a grip sack style, but still a rosin bag nonetheless. So those two products right there have survived both eras, continue to maintain popularity. There's nothing that's replaced those to where everyone's going, oh, I have to have that instead. So that's how you know you've got a really good product. White and black tape. And, you know, when I say white and black tape, your 1-inch white tape, your 3/4 inch white tape, your 3/4 inch black. These tapes right here, these have a popularity that doesn't seem to go away. It continues to maintain, even if a lot of bowlers don't know how to properly use them. You know, white tape's supposed to go in the front, black tape in the back, but, you know, in lining it up correctly, the fact is that white tapes and black tapes have survived for years because of the fact that they are a tool that every bowler can use for everything, whether it be for their gripping purposes, whether it be to get out of the ball quicker, whatever it is. It doesn't matter the generation. It doesn't matter how drilling techniques have evolved and whatnot. People like the feel of that tape, so that is something that has evolved and stayed with everybody over the years. Now, you also see that finger inserts, they're still very popular. They still sell great for pro shops. They're still a great way for pro shops to make extra income. But with finger inserts, you've seen a lot more develop as far as the hardness of the material. You've seen them develop as far as the design, whether it's the shape of the finger, whether it's the design of the grip having oval and lift on either side. You've seen inserts evolve over time, and with that evolution, you see increases in pricing and whatnot, but it's still a product that's evolving and learning, and you see a lot of that with interchangeable finger inserts, thumb inserts, and, you know, when it came to the vacuum grips, if you think of back to vacuum grips were something that came about, but people learned how to evolve and make vacuum grips without actually buying the bottom pieces that went in there. You could make a vacuum grip just out of drilling the hole bigger. So that was something that has really it's taken what we've learned in the past and it's created new products, and then we've gone from those new products and created even better ways, new ways to continue to evolve. But I think the last one I want to cover is the 2-ball tote. I think we all remember the 2-ball tote very well. You had totes that didn't have shoes and you had totes that did have shoes. And those 2-ball totes, had their popularity is like a stock chart. It goes up and down and up and down. And for a while they're real popular, and then they go down in popularity, and then they go back up. But when it comes to carrying a bowling ball or two, carrying shoes, whatever it is, The 2-ball tote is great because you can get everything in one trip if you're only taking 4 bowling balls. You can have a tote with shoes and a tote without shoes. You can have 2 totes with shoes, whatever you want to do. But their popularity continues to go moving forward because of the fact that it is a product that has a lot of use. It has a lot of use whether you're in the bowling center, whether you're in the pro shop, whatever it is. You got to put your bowling balls in something, and it's not as bulky, it's not big, and it's relatively inexpensive. So that's kind of a big deal moving forward. A lot of cost goes into bowling, and I think as we start to look at products that we have to have, certain products you're not going to be able, you'd be able to buy whatever you wanted in a product line, and you could afford to get it all. Because you could get an entire brand's accessories and balls and shoes and everything else. You can't really do that anymore because of the cost that is associated with the additional products. So you kind of got to pick and choose what it is that you want to have moving forward. And I think a lot of what you see moving forward is the fact that cost plays a factor into everything, and you only get the products that you know you're going to need. Some of them you have to have. If you're a competitive bowler, you've got rosin, smooth slide, tape. You've got all those things because you never know what you're going to run into. But you don't necessarily need all the things from the past that necessarily were really popular. But you don't necessarily need all the things that are currently very popular. So picking what accessories work for you and what products work for you is going to be a big thing moving forward. And like I said, don't just pick based on brand. Pick based on what works for you, what's going to work for your game. But they're going to be continue to be developed, and it's our job to basically look at it as pro shop operators and say what's going to be popular, because as they continue to develop these, they're going to keep doing it in hopes of getting something to stick, making something work. What's going to be the next best thing that can carry our line for 10 years, and it's just going to take some time to determine and figure out what that product is. But as the early products were popular, the popularity of those products has carried over, and we will continue to develop, and we will continue to see some of those that have been around forever continue to be around forever. And there'll always be those niche people out there that want that one product that no longer is being made, that's been on the market for 60 years, that you rarely ever sold any of. Something similar to like Pro Grip Cream or something like that. The minute they discontinue it will be when people want it. But, I got to tell you, make sure to check out, if you're in the pro shop business, I'm writing an article for Pro Shop Operator magazine, so that'll be in the November edition, so make sure to check that out. If you're a pro shop operator, you'll get it automatically, so you'll want to check that out. But I won't have a show on Friday because of the college tournament that's coming up on Friday, or this weekend in Muncie. I'm going to be working that, so I won't have a show on Friday because I'll be there, but I will be back on Monday. I want to go over some new things that I'm going to be going over next week in regards to the USBC and the PBA's partnership, as well as some standards that are basically being set across the board for the PBA and their new show on Fox. But I'll be covering that next week. But like I said, I want to make sure everyone knows I won't have a